Okay, good. I have a couple of things I want to cover today. The first is kind of finishing up with the ancient Aegean cultures. And I wanted to, want to start back here with this, this map. And so a lot of what we've seen here is really from the palace at Knossos. It's the one that they uncovered. And the culture, we believe, was wiped out by a massive tsunami because there are many, many earthquakes in this region. It's seismically and volcanically very active. But I wanted to point out a couple of other things, because basically what is happening here is like pre-Grecian Greek art. And I want to point to the island of Peloponnesus, which is part of Greece, obviously, but we won't talk about these others for a little while. Sparta. How many of you have heard of Sparta? Yeah, got some good hands. What is Sparta? It's over in Illinois, right? You ever been to Sparta? Like by Redbud? Well, Sparta, it's what we have here in the ancient world. We have an Egyptian empire where the pharaoh has kind of tied the whole culture together under his or her rule. But what we have in Sparta is the old model of a city-state. And Sparta, you guys have heard of that, and Sparta was kind of the early center of Greek life, and it was very important. And it was considered to be more of a warrior culture. So, any of you guys may have had school mascots, the Spartans, or just hearing about Michigan State, Spartans. See, these ancient ideas and ancient people, they still kind of come up quite a lot. And Spartan means, even in today's language, in modern English, we talk about Spartan as being very rough, very rugged. You have a Spartan existence, which means you don't really have a lot of luxuries. And if you're a true Spartan, you might just sleep on the floor instead of a comfy bed. That you don't really have a lot of the amenities of modern life. That's a Spartan existence, and that's how they raised them in Sparta. And they were probably relatively poor, but they were always training their young to be in the military. And so if you're in the military, you get a little cushy being out on marching 50, 75 miles a day and sleeping on the ground, not getting much sleep at all, not having a whole lot to eat. If you're used to it, you could probably be a pretty good warrior. If you're not, it just doesn't work out. And so Alexander the great Alexander the Great, was a Spartan. And that's how we come to the rise of Greek culture. And all of these warriors kind of take over everything. They take over much of the known world and stuff. And so that is really the beginning of Greek culture, but it comes out of all of these Aegean cultures. And so we'll talk more about that in chapter 5 when we look at Greece, but I did want to make the point. This is starting a new strand, a new timeline, a new model. And so we talked about some of this stuff, and here is the palace at Knossos, and we talked about, here's the elaborate floor plan and why so much of this was actually preserved and been lived in for almost 4,000 years. And so, and we know, we talked about the red columns, this hypostyle, which columns are used to support the building with large areas in between so that you can walk around. And we ended up with this, I believe, La Parisienne, fragment of a fresco. And we didn't get to this. And so one of the things about having the palace at Knossos in such good condition, see, and here is a fresco, by the way, bull leaping from the palace, Knossos, Crete, modern day Greece, 1500 BCE. So 3,500 years old. This fresco has survived. And I like to believe that this is kind of an indicator. It's kind of the roots of Western European culture. As I was saying, this is pre-Greek Greek, but Greece will influence Rome, and Rome will influence the rest of Western Europe and so on. But it finds its roots here. And can you make this out? These guys are pretty much tormenting this bull, and this guy is jumping over the bull. So, can you name any other cultures that practice this kind of activity? When, where, how, whom, to what, for what? Well, how about in the Spanish culture? The bull is very important to Spanish culture, which Roman culture was very much influential as well. But this idea of bull leaping, this goes way back. And if you know about Spanish culture, they have one of their iconic sports is the bullfight. Of course, they're trying to do away with that because most of the time the bulls get killed. But what you have out there, if you've never seen this, it's really quite fascinating. They have a big, huge, angry bull. And this guy called the matador gets all dressed up, and he has with him a number of spears, and he has a cape. And he tries to fool the bull. And, the bull, you'll see that the matador is behind the cape, but the matador will step aside. The bull rushes the cape, and boom, matador puts a spear in his back. And we do this until the bull is dead. They have other rituals. The running of the bulls. In Spain, it's an annual event, and they have all of the men are out in the street, and they let loose a herd of angry bulls. And all of these bulls run down the street, and they're very dangerous animals. It's kind of not, at least in today's society, kind of recognize that that a bull is when angry, a very dangerous animal. And part of that has to do with these horns, and they know how to use those very effectively, and they kill people when they're angry. And so there's this element of danger. And you see here, this figure looks like maybe has a cape or something, maybe not, but they're tormenting this bull while this guy jumps over the back. Wow, pretty crazy. Good thing we don't do that in the United States. Wait a minute. We do this in the United States. It's called a rodeo. And you have in the rodeo people that try to ride these bulls and see how long that they could stay on the back of an angry bull, a bucking Brahma, as they call them. Bottom line is that usually, like 10 seconds or less, the bull riders are already thrown off. And then you have these other people like here, and in the United States American version, rodeo clowns. And it's their job to distract the bulls when they're about ready to kill somebody and try to maintain some level of safety. But being a rodeo clown itself is a very dangerous job. So anyway, this is what we can trace all of that stuff back to. Bull leaping. So we know that about this. And the other part I wanted to bring up, and I think I touched on it on Monday, this is typically called Minoan culture. And that is named after the king who occupied the palace at Knossos, and his name was King Minos, M-I-N-O-S. We know about it. And we know a lot about Minoan legend too, because a lot of this, at least as stories and folklore and poetry and epic poems, had survived through Greece until today. I mean, we know about these people and what they did. But King Minos was the guy for whom this whole culture, you'll find this, I'm telling you, in case you do some research, you'll see the word Minoan. The king is Minos, M-I-N-O-S. And one of the legends, I want to talk about this here a little bit, is that in the palace at Knossos, and you can see it's really quite an elaborate palace, it had been the myth that King Minos had under this palace stashed away, kind of locked up in the basement, if you will. And let me see. Hallie, I see you shaking your head. You know what I'm going to say, don't you?
Well, I was just thinking about the Greek legend with I think
That's exactly right. And yes. And it was named after this culture and the king, M-I-N-O. And the tar is a Greek Latin word for beast or monster, like a dinosaur, a minotaur, anyway. Yes, that's exactly right. And this minotaur was what? Half bull and half man? The upper part was bull. You'll see this too. I don't know, you'll see it so much depicted here, but if you ever take the second part of this art history sequence, which is ADAH 150, we'll cover, I teach it too, various classical revivals. and they happened during the Renaissance, and they happened in the 19th century in Western Europe, 18th, 19th century. And that becomes quite a subject. You'll see a lot of artwork dedicated to the Minotaur, which just reminded me of something. I'm gonna have to see if I can show you before the class is over. I worked as a graduate student. I worked as a project assistant to one of the professors at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he was doing a large scale sculpture, which now sits in the National Sculpture Garden in Japan. And that sculpture, the subject of which was a Minotaur. So even today, we see a lot of Minotaur stuff popping up. I showed you the Anubis as well. Those things go back to antiquity. And so anyway, that is the palace at Knossos, and we traced it all the way back to the Minotaur, the ancient, how should I say this? There's so many changes. Ancient Crete in Minoan culture. And so anyway, we know that the parts of this palace we find are just absolutely beautiful. And so this is a different palace, but bottom line is, this is the same kind of style. And what they're doing here, landscape with swallows. There are the swallows, beautiful birds, very delightful songbirds. And we got flowers and all kinds of things here. And this is kind of unusual in itself, because most everything that we've seen painted to this point has been a power thing. It's connected to the religion, it's connected to the important people, it's connected to the power of the throne, if you will. Directly, indirectly, it's the pharaoh and his ministers supervising the harvesting of the wheat and stuff like that. Great battle scenes. This is decorative as far as we know. And so we see some changes here from the norm and the idea of beauty in and for its own sake starts to arise. And we talked about miniature ships fresco. And another example, that's why I showed you guys the Khufu solar boat, because the Egyptians traded with all of these people, not only in the Aegean Sea, but all along the Mediterranean coast in what is now the Middle East, which would be like Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, all of those places. And they had the means. Crocus gatherers, East Wall. Another fresco from the Cycladic cultures. You guys know what crocuses are? Oh, come on. You need to take botany. Actually, they're all over the place. They're really the first flowers that pop up in spring. They're very small, they're very low to the ground. It's kind of what they look like here. They're real tiny, but they're kind of the daffodil and tulip family. They're bulb flower. They are harbingers of the spring. Again, looks more like about beauty than kind of a political or religious thing. I say that because what we find in Greece is that they'll turn their eye towards notions of the beautiful. And so they decorate their pottery. And this becomes a major art form. And this is still quite early, 3,700 years ago, but we find pottery going through the entirety of the Greek culture. And so I wanted to get this one here too, which marine style octopus flask. And what we'll find out is that these vessels, this is called a Carmes ware jar, and it's just called a jar. But these things will become kind of codified, and you'll start to be able to tell by how the piece was shaped and what the handles look like, what the mouth is, as to what kind of vessel it is. And this is called a flask, and it's only 11 inches high. So it would be something, it would only carry really not very much liquid. But the important part of this, to me, look at the design on this. This is like, to me, quite amazing. And in a lot of ways, we were talking about naturalism or symbolism. It's really kind of a nice combination of both. I don't think realistically you would see on the tentacles all of the suckers all exposed at one time. And so it is exaggerated, but it's done in a way. How many designers do I have in here? You guys, yeah? Give me some design critique on this. Not talking to you. Well, I'll give you some design. How about this? The idea of composition. You guys kind of know some of that. Some of you are going to be doing that. Maybe for a long, long time. You're getting educated. And so there's a design here that with this subject, the octopus, they fill up all of the space, and they do it in a way that's actually kind of visually appealing. Would you agree with that? And the tentacles go all over the place, and they fill up all the space. And in between, we got these little indicators of probably some other kind of sea life, like an urchin, like right there. And we see the eyes of the octopus and so on. But those tentacles with all of the suckers, they give a kind of rhythm and repetition to the composition. And so Brendan, would you agree with all that? See, we're still using a lot of the same design principles that were laid down 3,500 years ago. And this is a Western idea. You would probably find different models and uses and variation on composition, but this is Western lineage. And so anyway, that's what I love about this. It's really quite a predictor of where design and decoration will go for centuries. Here's another piece from the Palace at Knossos, the snake goddess. And we don't really know that much about their religion, but this has been really quite well researched and written about. It's been kind of considered to be one of the most important works out of this culture, aside from the palace itself. And it kind of, how should I say this? Part of what this does is depict a woman in a position of importance, a position of power. We call her a goddess. We know that she has to be at least important enough to make a statue of, but the other part is you see dressed in all kinds of elaborate clothing. We see that she probably a high priestess, maybe a goddess, but it is, we would like to really pick out and acknowledge those times and these objects from the ancient world that venerate women, because they are truly pretty few and far between. We talked about Nefertiti, for example, Pharaoh's wife, etc. But bottom line, it's been mostly men, and it's been mostly a male-centric culture. But this is important. Young God, and we always seem to ascribe God and Goddess to these statues and paintings when we really don't know exactly what they did. But what I wanted to bring to your attention here is this. And that's an add-on. That's something that the museum put together so we can hold this together. Two separate pieces of the same thing. And this is a less invasive technique to put a circle device, circular shelf or hold or whatever you want to call it, and hold the top part in place. We'll see, as we talk about, like with Jericho and Mesopotamian cultures, a lot of times the archaeologists wrote numbers and stuff. And one of the other things that they did a lot of was drill into these artifacts and put like steel rods in them, which actually is invasive and destructive to some extent. Harvester's base, you can see that's what they're doing. These people, they got their pitchforks, they got all of the things they need to go bring in the wheat. Still from the same place in Crete. And so what we know is that this is a center of culture, but also a center of artistic activity. And so I want to go back. Here we go. We're moving into Peloponnnesia. And this is where Tyrann's where this comes from. And it's the palace and the citadel. Basically, what's happening here is that this is a fortress, and this is what's left of it. It's in Peloponnesia, but the Peloponnesian culture, as I was saying about Sparta, these were warrior people. And when they built the palace, they built a fortress. That's what the citadel is. And they also, in Peloponnesia, developed some architectural methods and designs. And this is called a corbelled arch construction. And we've seen so far, basically, we've seen the archway and we've seen the post and lintel. This is something that's actually quite different, a corbelled arch. And this is what this looks like on the inside. And see, this is still 3,500 years old or so. But this is Tyrann's. This is those ruins that I just showed you. But we can get from that the fact that they had kind of come up with a new archaeological. We see the hypostyle, which is basically post and lintel, archways, corbelled arch, corbelled vaulted. And so anyway, this is a reconstruction of the palace at Nestor. And this is, as they call it, the artist conception. And we believe this, well, this is hypostyle. Great paintings of mythical beasts, lions. Lions always seem to be a part of this culture as well, just like we saw in Mesopotamia. Lion's Gate from Mycenae. And up in this archway, we see two lions. And so the idea of lions as being a symbol of power and authority, we saw that in the Middle East. We've seen that in Persian culture. We saw that in other Mesopotamian cultures, and that persists in through. And so this is the treasury of Atreus, corbelled vault, post and lintel. And here's the inside. And so they actually, underneath all of this, anyway, underneath these ruins, we have this. This is this grave circle looking southwest. And I wanted to show you this. This is the kind of architecture, and this is a circuit wall, which when we're talking about a circuit wall, have any idea what that could be referring to? So we got wires. We got wires underneath that drop ceiling. Those wires are called circuits. Circuits being that it's a way to move one thing from one place to another. That's a circuit. And in the wires, they're a circuit, but they're moving the electricity. In this case, it's probably troops to defend the citadel. And so the other part, and this was a real one I was looking for, the treasury at Atreus. Treasury means exactly what you would think it means. It's where they kept the money, the gold, the jewels, the valuables, anything worth anything, and look at it. It's underground, which is really strategically a pretty good place to hide your stuff. And this is the inside. It's actually from a small door. You see, it opens up quite wide, and you could really store many things there. And this is the grave circle I was talking about. We got bits and pieces of what ancient Mycenaean culture was like. But I do want to say this. I want to put the star on this. Funerary mask from grave circle A, which comes from one of those places I just showed you. And this is a Mycenaean king. Bottom line is this. We see the idea of a death mask persisting. I was talking about that with ancient Egypt. And we saw that in Jericho with the plaster skull and things. And so anyway, this is considered, in some circles, it's actually considered to be the earliest truly Greek work of art. Now you'll find some dispute on that, but you see, it's got a likeness. It's also kind of stylized. Nobody's ears like go straight out the side of their head in that manner. But anyway, it's recognizable, somewhat natural, and it's beaten gold. So that's another thing we know. We knew that from Egypt. Gold is precious. And there are certain cultures around the world where gold was just kind of an ordinary thing. And they were subject throughout history to attacks from people who coveted gold. Let's take like the Incas in Peru and so on. But bottom line, ancient, and again, they decorated their things. It's a dagger blade with the lion hunt. Another recurring theme. So there is a lot of continuity, even though we're talking about a period of thousands of years. The Sapphio, they used to call this the Sapphio cup, and now it's just called a drinking cup. I'm saying that too, because you'll probably, if you look up this, you'll have to use Sapphio. But anyway, early Greek, naturalism, not so much an emphasis on gods, but beauty and earthly beauty and stuff like that, they seem to permeate this culture. And two goddesses, again, I say we call depictions that we don't know about goddesses, and female head from Mycenae. And this is all on the island of Peloponnesia. Warrior base. This is an important one because, as I was saying earlier, Peloponnesia, basically a warrior culture centered around places like Tiryns, but mostly from Sparta. And here we got an idea of what these ancient Greek warriors look like. And that is that. And so what else? I want to show you today. Where's my more? There. Share screen. Slideshow. From beginning. Check my slide share. Looks like we're good. All right. I put this together. The next step in talking about research in this class. How many of you know what peer-reviewed sources are, or what that means? Jordan?
You have to.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
I know in like in the library stuff, there's like a tablet and then it's like articles.
Your student peers can enter stuff in. I'm trying to figure out what you're saying. Ah, there's a tablet.
I don't know exactly what it is, but
Yeah, okay. See, that's why I'm bringing this up, because there are many kinds of things that are under the title peer review. And what George's talking about is absolutely true. What you got here as a resource, and you can find this in the library, is that if you're having trouble with your research or writing your paper, you can find students, fellow students, if you will, to kind of look at your paper and give you some suggestions. That's peer review. Now, when I talk about peer review sources in the library itself, it's the same thing, except it's done on a grand scale. And so here we go. I put this together. It's all PowerPoint because I want to keep moving the share screen back and forth. But this is the library website address. First place you go. And this is what you get. The home page, library, resources. And what I have here is the resources. Just click this, you get this, and a full search. Usually you want to start off with a full search and narrow it down. And then here is your subject, author, media, filters. But anyway, this is where you start on the home page. And I thought I'd do a search on something we just looked at, the Khufu solar boat. And so you see, I have this, it's on journals here. And here is what I get. And so Khufu solar boats, and then you got expanders and you got limiters here. And basically, I click this, peer reviewed. And this is what I got. And so when you were talking about peer reviewed here, it's basically the gold standard of research. And so when these articles appear in academic journals, they have to go through a board of reviewers, of experts in the field to make sure that everything that they're publishing is accurate and true. And so it's an old thing. It's been around forever. And it is kind of the fact finder. It's kind of the Snopes. It's kind of the kind of the filter that keeps a lot of the other stuff out. And so this is what I got, and it was limited to peer review. I'm going to go to the next slide. And I have peer reviewed. Okay. See, I clicked peer reviewed, and this is the first one. You peer reviewed, the first one is a different one. So it does filter out a lot of stuff. And in this one, if my screenshot will allow, this is not limited to, and it starts with Egypt starts transporting Khufu solar boat. Peer reviewed changes everything. And so that's how you get there. And what you'll find is that with kind of a broad subject like this, Khufu solar boat, you'll find different kinds of articles. Investigation and analysis study of an old kingdom, Cheops, first boat or blade, solar boat of Cheops, archaeological, historical, ethnographic approaches to the study of sewn boats. What? Sewn? Well, that's what they call that method of construction that we talked about on Monday, where Selima was talking about getting those reeds and rubbing them together and making really strong rope. That's how they built theirs. They didn't use nails or any other metal fasteners. And so anyway, so that's what you get. Next slide. Still, it's the same. Same search. I'm not getting the whole picture here of this slide. Yeah, there we go. And so you see, there'll be a lot of different things. And what I did was scroll down, and a quest for ancient Egyptian air. Scientists use space technology for non-destructive probe of 4,600-year-old boat chamber at the foot of the Great Pyramid. So that's same thing we're talking about, Khufu's boat, and they want to analyze the air. They want to do it with high tech. Again, what I say about all of the tools archaeologists have at their disposal at this time. And so here is something that you'll find typically when you click on the source, the hot link. You'll find under that, among the other information, an abstract. And the abstract is basically a synopsis of what is in the source. And so I searched for the solar boat of Khufu, but it'll give me things about weather. It'll give me things about the methods. It'll give me a lot of different kinds of things. This one is about geo-environmental and structural problems. And basically, this article is about preserving the pyramids and all of the other stuff. It says the main objectives of this study are to, one, assess the current status of the preservation of this unique and high valuable archaeological site. I want to add this. Sometimes you'll find how this is written, you could tell that it's somebody not from the US, because we would say highly, we would use that as an adjective. But say, 2, to analyze various sections of that, cause the destruction of the pyramid complex, in particular the weathering activities and strong seismic event. That's what I was talking about with the palace at Knossos. Seismic events is part of the world, and especially over millennia, there are a lot of earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, and so on. And so, and 3, to determine the geochemical and engineering properties for construction materials using different types of tools and advanced analytical and diagnostic techniques. Again, not only are they finding new stuff all of the time, there's a rush to save what we know. And so the pyramids, they don't look like they did 4,500 years ago. Time has taken its toll, but is there anything going on that might cause us some concern at the moment? Do I hear somebody say climate change? Weather and climatic conditions are at least expected, strongly suggested, maybe proven, that climate will become more severe in the upcoming years. And the damage that'll be done to our ancient sites will be, maybe end up being irreparable. And so everything that's going on today, and you can see it in the news, you can see it all over the place. We're losing a lot of stuff. When we look at Rome, we'll see that basically the city of Rome is still in the same place that it was 2,500 years ago. But we have automobile traffic, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide. There's all kinds of pollutants in the air that actually eat away at those ancient buildings. That's just in the last 100 years since we've had automobiles. We've seen a rapid decline in these structures, in these antiquities. So anyway, the work includes a discussion and analysis of the natural character and source of the pyramids, building stones, geological context, damage survey, petrographic investigation, which means look at the stones, and physical and mechanical characterization of the stones and structural mortars by means of laboratory and in situ testing. In situ, need some help. In situ. That's on site. On site is lab. So anyway, that's the kind of stuff that you could likely find. And so any questions about primary sources, how to get to this stuff in the library? Like I said, I took screenshots of this, so hopefully you can, you're looking for the page. You can start off on the hot link that I provided, but it's all there. The other thing I want to emphasize is that the librarians are extremely helpful over there. And if you're having trouble finding, you get lost somewhere in this maze of information and stuff, they got resources. They got people that'll help you find what you're looking for. Now, I directed this at peer-reviewed sources. Because if you open this, any subject up, you're liable to find anything. You'll have much more information than you could possibly handle. And there won't be any validation to it. Peer review, as Jordan was talking about, is a tool to help you get it right. And it is a check and balance among scholars to make sure that the information is legit. So a little early, I got through a little quicker. You guys like, this is like Poppins before we had Poppins. It's called twiddling your thumb. Spinner. Well, honestly, that's all I got today. And I'm slowing it down a little bit because your peers in the other section were not here yesterday because Maryville reaches out. So I'm slowing it down a little bit for you and getting those guys caught up tomorrow. And we'll talk about Greek art. One of the kinds of vessels they created was called an urn, URN. We still use that today, typically to put ashes of cremated dead people. So if somebody asks you what is a Grecian urn, you could say, well, at least minimum wage. Just say. I'll see you guys next week. I'll let you think. And if you burst out into laughter, I will not be offended.